Black teenager bride disappears on honeymoon after marrying 70-year-old white man. What happens next will shock you. It was a day like no other. The sun shone brightly as the small town buzzed with excitement for the wedding of 17-year-old Maya, a sweet and lively teenager, and 70-year-old Mr. Thomas. He wasn't just any old man. Mr. Thomas was wealthy, respected in his own circle, and had been a regular at the local store where Maya worked. No one truly understood the connection between the two of them, least of all Maya's family and friends. A 17-year-old bride marrying a man old enough to be her grandfather. It just didn't make sense to them. Still, Maya was radiant, walking down the aisle with a nervous smile, her eyes only focused on the man waiting for her at the altar. Mr. Thomas stood there with a proud, almost smug expression on his face. He was far older than anyone would expect for a bridegroom, yet he held himself with a calm that came with years of experience. He gazed at Maya with a certain possessiveness, as though the union had been a long time coming. People whispered to one another as they watched. Was this true love, or something darker? But before we continue with this shocking turn of events, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because you don't want to miss the incredible twists that lie ahead. Trust me, this story is far from over. Stick with us, and let's unravel the mystery of Maya's disappearance together. As the vows were exchanged, Maya's eyes shone with what seemed to be happiness, but there was an unmistakable tension in her face, like she was hiding something. She moved with grace, but her heart seemed heavy, her gaze distant, as though she was somewhere else entirely. Something about the moment didn't sit right. Why was she doing this? Maya's best friend, Jade, couldn't stop asking herself that question. She had seen Maya laughing, talking, and even sharing plans for a future together with Mr. Thomas in the past weeks. But today, something felt off. It wasn't that Maya didn't love him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the marriage wasn't entirely her choice. Had Maya been swept up in something she couldn't control? Was she making a decision that would change her life forever? As the couple exchanged rings and kissed, there was a silence in the room, a moment where everyone was both happy for the young girl and horrified by the situation at hand. Some in the audience clapped politely, while others whispered doubts to one another. This doesn't feel like a fairy tale, they thought. It feels like a secret. The celebration afterward was filled with food, laughter, and music, but the air was thick with unease. Maya and Mr. Thomas smiled, posing for photos, but Maya's eyes seemed to be searching for something. Anything, to calm her nerves. As the night drew on, she disappeared briefly from the crowd, her face clouded with worry. She wasn't acting like a typical newlywed, but when she returned, she put on a smile and joined the festivities, as if everything was fine. Then the newlyweds left for their honeymoon, an exotic, secluded island where no one would be able to reach them. The rest of the guests watched them leave with a mixture of jealousy and concern. There was an air of finality in the way Maya waved goodbye, a kind of resolve in her expression that made her friends uneasy. But what no one knew was that Maya wasn't as happy as she appeared. The truth was, she felt trapped. As she boarded the plane with Mr. Thomas, a knot tightened in her stomach. She was about to face a future she wasn't sure she was ready for. And though she'd made the decision to go through with the wedding, a part of her, deep down, was still terrified about what was to come. And now, here's where the story gets even more interesting, because what happened next wasn't what anyone expected. Just 3 days into their honeymoon, something strange happened. The sun was setting over the crystal-clear waters of the tropical island when Mr. Thomas returned to their hotel room alone. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he walked through the door, his eyes darting nervously around. He told the hotel staff that Maya had gone for a walk along the beach and hadn't returned. He seemed unusually calm, almost too calm for someone whose young bride had just vanished without a trace. The hotel staff, though concerned, didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't uncommon for guests to wander off or take a quiet moment alone. But as the hours passed and the night stretched on, unease began to settle in. The night staff tried calling Maya's phone, No answer. They assumed she'd simply lost track of time, perhaps enjoying the peaceful surroundings. But when dawn broke, and she still hadn't returned, panic began to set in. Her phone, wallet, and all her belongings were still in the hotel room. Her sandals were neatly placed by the door, as if she'd just stepped out for a moment and intended to come back. But Maya was nowhere to be found. Mr. Thomas remained unusually composed, even when the hotel's management insisted on calling the local authorities. "She'll turn up," he kept repeating. "She's just off on her own." But the more he spoke, the more suspicious his behavior became. Why wasn't he more concerned? Was he hiding something? As the hours passed, the police began their search. They combed the beach, checked the nearby jungle paths, and spoke to the few locals who had seen the couple. One fisherman, who had been on the beach the previous evening, told them that he had seen Maya and Mr. Thomas arguing under the dim light of the setting sun. The fisherman mentioned hearing Maya's voice rise in distress, but he couldn't make out the words. She had looked scared, like she was about to leave, her body tense, as if she wanted to run. The fisherman also noticed something odd. Mr. Thomas was holding her arm firmly, not allowing her to walk away. When he called out to them, asking if everything was okay, Mr. Thomas had turned to him with a cold, warning look and told him to mind his business. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there were still more questions than answers. Why was Maya so upset? Why did she seem to be trying to escape? And why was Mr. Thomas so calm about her sudden disappearance? The local authorities, now alarmed by the fisherman's account, launched a full investigation. Yet the more they searched, the fewer clues they found. Maya had simply vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the hotel, nothing to indicate where she had gone or if something more sinister had happened. All they had was Mr. Thomas's calm demeanor and a growing sense of unease in the air. Back at home, Maya's family was beginning to learn the terrible news. Her mother, Sarah, couldn't believe it when the call came. Her daughter, her baby girl, was missing, and it felt like the whole world was upside down. Where is she? What happened? Sarah cried on the phone to the authorities. It wasn't like Maya to just disappear. She was strong, independent, and always kept in touch. But now there were no answers, and Sarah could feel the weight of something terrible hanging in the air. The town began to buzz with rumors. People whispered about the wedding. Was it a forced marriage? Did Mr. Thomas have something to do with her disappearance? A sense of dread hung over everyone. It was hard for anyone to believe that Maya, so full of life, could just vanish like this. And the more people learned about Mr. Thomas's past, the way he controlled and manipulated things, his reputation for using money to get what he wanted, the more suspicion began to grow. Something was wrong, and the truth was starting to feel darker and more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Maya wasn't just missing. She was in danger, and someone, somewhere, was hiding the truth. The search intensified, and yet the days stretched on with no sign of Maya. The people who once celebrated her wedding now feared for her life. Could she have run away? Or was there something far more sinister at play? But what happens next? The truth was closer than anyone realized, and with each passing moment, the mystery deepened. If you want to know what happens to Maya and how the shocking twist unfolds, don't forget to subscribe, because the darkest secrets are still yet to be revealed. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned, the mystery is just beginning. Back home, Maya's family was spiraling into panic. Her mother, Sarah, couldn't believe the news she'd received. Maya, her vibrant, strong-willed daughter, was missing. The phone calls, the endless texts that went unanswered, all of it felt like a nightmare. Sarah had been uneasy about the marriage from the start. How could Maya marry a man so much older than her? But she trusted her daughter, believing she was making the right choice, despite her concerns. Now, with no contact from Maya, that trust felt shattered. Maya would never disappear like this, Sarah whispered to herself, pacing the house, tears in her eyes. The authorities had reassured her they were doing everything they could, but the hours turned into days. Every passing minute made it feel like they were losing hope. Meanwhile, the story had made its way into the news. The media's interest grew as people from around the country followed the mystery of the missing teenager. The case quickly gained traction, with many questioning the relationship between Maya and Mr. Thomas. It didn't help that Maya's friends and family felt the marriage had been rushed, and some even wondered if it had been forced. The more people talked, the more Mr. Thomas's calm demeanor seemed out of place. Why wasn't he more worried about his young bride? As the investigation continued, the local authorities were determined to find Maya, but each lead seemed to go cold. The beach, the surrounding area, and even the dense tropical forests surrounding the hotel were searched repeatedly. Yet there was no trace of Maya. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just an empty hotel room. Then, one morning, a breakthrough came. A local fisherman, who had been at the beach the day Maya disappeared, reported something strange. He recalled seeing Maya and Mr. Thomas talking by the water, their conversation heated. The fisherman remembered that Maya seemed visibly upset, her shoulders hunched as if she was trying to escape. Mr. Thomas, according to the fisherman, had a firm grip on her arm and was leading her away from the public area. The fisherman had overheard snippets of their argument and could hear Maya's distressed voice pleading to go home. "I can't do this anymore. Please let me go." Maya's voice had carried through the air, her words heavy with fear. The fisherman had called out, but Mr. Thomas had shot him a warning glance and told him to mind his own business. The fisherman hadn't dared to intervene any further, but he had noticed how Mr. Thomas had kept his distance from the locals after that moment. The police brought the fisherman in for questioning, and his account changed everything. It painted a picture of a situation far darker than anyone had imagined. Maya wasn't just missing. She had been desperate to leave. She had been asking for help. But where had she gone after that conversation? Had Mr. Thomas somehow kept her locked away, hidden from view? Or had something even more sinister happened? The authorities began digging deeper into Mr. Thomas's past. They discovered that his wealth and power had often been used to manipulate situations. He had a history of controlling relationships, using his resources to get what he wanted. But until now, no one had ever suspected the lengths he might go to control others. As the search expanded, a team of investigators flew to the island, and the hotel staff worked closely with the police. They began to uncover even more disturbing details. Mr. Thomas had rented a small, secluded cabin on the outskirts of the island under a different name. The authorities now wondered if Maya had been kept there, hidden away, or worse. Why had Mr. Thomas not mentioned the cabin? What was he hiding? As news of the investigation spread, Maya's family grew desperate. They posted flyers, held rallies, and pleaded with the public for any information about Maya's whereabouts. Her friends, too, were coming forward with unsettling memories. Maya had been acting strange before the wedding. She had told her best friend, Jade, that she wasn't sure about the marriage but didn't know how to get out of it. "I don't want to disappoint anyone," Maya had said. "But I don't know if I can do this." Jade now felt guilty. She hadn't realized just how much Maya was struggling. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure on the authorities grew. The whole town had been watching the case unfold on the news, and rumors were swirling everywhere. Some people believed Maya had run away, tired of the life she had been forced into. Others, however, couldn't shake the growing feeling that something far more dangerous was happening. Then, a twist no one could have predicted occurred. Police found a hidden trail leading to the cabin Mr. Thomas had rented. Inside, they found signs that Maya had been there. The clues were subtle. Scraps of paper with phone numbers written in Maya's handwriting, personal items that couldn't have been left by Mr. Thomas. The search team felt a sickening realization settle in their stomachs. They were getting closer, but time was running out. Maya's family refused to give up hope. Her mother, Sarah, visited the police station every day, her eyes tired but determined. She knew something wasn't right. Maya wouldn't have just left. She wouldn't have run away, not without telling someone. Sarah knew, deep down, that there was more to this story. And then, just when it seemed like the search would go on forever, another unexpected clue was found, one that would change everything. But what happens next? The truth about Maya's disappearance was closer than anyone realized. And as the investigation deepened, it uncovered secrets that would leave everyone in shock. The search for Maya had reached a breaking point. Weeks had passed, and the island had been scored from one end to the other. The local police had all but run out of leads, but the pressure was mounting. The investigation felt like it was slipping through their fingers. No one knew where Maya was, and even her family began to fear the worst. Her mother, Sarah, spent sleepless nights praying that Maya would return home safe. The entire town was on edge. Had Maya been taken against her will? Had she really run away? Or was something far darker at play? But just when it seemed like the case would fade into the background, a breakthrough came that no one could have expected. The police, now focusing on Mr. Thomas' rented cabin on the outskirts of the island, had uncovered something shocking, an old hidden room beneath the cabin's floorboards. The police had entered cautiously, knowing that the area was secluded and dangerous. Inside, they found remnants of Maya's presence, scraps of paper with phone numbers, personal items she had left behind. But there was something else, something chilling that took everyone by surprise. Letters and photos that Mr. Thomas had kept, documenting his previous relationships with young women, many of whom had come and gone from his life under strange circumstances. It was clear now. Mr. Thomas wasn't just a wealthy old man with a young wife. He was a manipulator, someone who used his money, power, and influence to control and dominate the lives of others. But how had Maya gotten away from him? What had happened in the days leading up to her disappearance? And then, the unthinkable happened. A phone call came in from a local who had been walking near the forest's edge. She reported seeing someone she recognized. Maya. The young girl was staggering out of the woods, looking disoriented but alive. She was pale, thin, and exhausted, but she had escaped. Maya had made it out of the trap Mr. Thomas had set for her. Maya was rushed to a local clinic for medical attention. She was scared, traumatized, but she was safe. The police arrived, and Maya's eyes filled with tears as they asked her what happened. She was shaking, her body trembling as she relived the terrifying truth. Maya explained that after the argument on the beach, she had found herself trapped in Mr. Thomas's secluded cabin. She had been kept there, isolated from the world, and Mr. Thomas had tried to control her every move. He had told her she would never be able to leave, that no one would believe her. But I knew I had to escape, she whispered, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't stay. He was not the man I thought he was. Maya had planned her escape for days. At night, when Mr. Thomas was asleep, she snuck out and ran as fast as she could, making her way through the jungle and across the beach until she found someone who could help her. The truth was darker than anyone had imagined. Mr. Thomas wasn't just an elderly man marrying a young girl. He was a predator who had manipulated Maya into marriage and trapped her in a life she didn't want. The community, once divided over the strange marriage, now saw the full picture. It wasn't love. It was control. And Maya had fought back. With Maya safely back in the arms of her family, the investigation didn't stop. Mr. Thomas was arrested for his actions, facing charges of kidnapping, coercion, and emotional abuse. He had used his wealth and status to hide behind his power, but the truth had come to light. The people who had doubted Maya's story now rallied behind her, supporting her as she rebuilt her life. Maya's courage in escaping was a turning point, not only for her own freedom, but for others who might have been in similar situations, afraid to speak up. In the days that followed, Maya slowly began to heal. With her family by her side, she started to rebuild her life, one day at a time. Her experience, painful as it was, became a powerful story of strength, survival, and the courage to fight for one's own freedom. As for Mr. Thomas, his actions caught up with him, and the world finally knew the truth. No amount of money or influence could protect him from the justice that Maya had finally brought to light. Wow, what a journey. Maya's story is one of resilience and courage, but it also sheds light on the importance of speaking out and standing up for yourself, no matter how hard it may seem. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story gripping and inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life mysteries, shocking twists, and incredible tales of survival. We have so much more to share with you, so stay tuned and be part of this growing community. Your support means everything.